The outlet to our marriage. Part 2, Part 1 down below, the lift. Back to my long weekend. Things are well. We talked long into the night and in great detail about things. We'll see what happens with the Poly, but I am hopeful. I'll take that for now. I can begin the walk towards forgiveness and reconciliation based on many factors. But key is this, she isn't that person anymore and neither am I. She was only that person for a short time frame, same as me. She has been remorseful, has done everything I've asked during my, and our, recovery, and she hasn't had a hint of anything like this in the time since this affair ended. It doesn't make me a weak person to forgive either, and it's definitely not based on financials, children, or any other such thing. And the other part of this that is truly amazing. I'm not an overly forgiving person by nature, yet working to forgive in this instance has opened my eyes to so many things. Why was all I can say. And yes, there are some deal breakers for this reconciliation, to be certain. She knows where she stands, and if it's found that any part of the discovery isn't factual, well, let's just say there isn't going to be much grace left from me. And yes, I still love her very much, and there is no doubt that she loves me. I believe the love we had, however broken it was at the time, was also a saving factor in keeping it to an end and to end it. A physical affair. Well, if that was something that had been confessed to in the beginning of disclosure, I might have decided to take that to IC with me to see if there was some way I could reconcile it. But if it were to come out now, fully 3 months after D-Day, that the affair was a full-blown PA, that would be the death blow for certain. In no particular order. 1. If I find out affair was a PA. 2. If she ever contacted him at all after the affair was over, or if he contacted her and she hid it from me. 3. If I find she's had other talks with other docs or coworkers, found nothing of the sort and never a hint before or since this guy. But if I find there was another, I'm done. 4. Changing passwords, new email accounts without telling me. Any secretive behavior with devices, new contacts from guys I don't know or haven't heard of. Can't hide this stuff now. 5. Changing her behavior to not being remorseful, but instead blaming me or trying to rush this process of recovery. That won't work. 6. If I find that she met him away from hospital before or after work, regardless of whether or not they did anything. Just being willing to do that would say a lot about her intent. Really had a nice getaway with W, despite where we are right now. I tried to almost look at us from the outside, tried to turn my emotions off as much as possible, especially when talking about the affair. I think I've really had 2 points hammered home, points that I had already reconciled with myself, really, but getting out and away from everything such as work, kids, friends, etc. helped to give more clarity of mind, and really soul as well. The 2 points are this. 1. We work better together than apart. This marriage of ours has been great at times, and I feel that it will be again. The last couple of years have already shown its true potential. 2. I'll survive, I'll be alright if it doesn't work out. If she fails the Poly, or we get a parking lot confession, or if simply more details come to light or whatever and I decide to walk away, I can look at myself in the mirror and say that I've done all that I can and I gave us an honest chance to rebuild. It just simply wasn't meant to be. I sincerely hope, however, that point number 2 does not come to fruition. We do work well together and we do love each other deeply, but I am keeping my hope in check as we approach Tuesday and the Poly. Either way, I am at peace with things. We had some really long, deep talks this weekend. Understanding her mindset from that time frame as well as present has been absolutely paramount as we work toward recovery. If there are any more details to come, it will be somewhat surprising. It won't be shocking, as nothing shocks me anymore, but I will be a bit surprised given the texts that I have and the discussions we've been through. I did reiterate that should anything else come out previously unknown, anything physical, going to meet him, any I love yous, or if I find she disparaged me and or our marriage to him, it would be catastrophic. Cautiously optimistic is where I am right now. This coming week will be one to remember no matter the result. I do love her, and what we had before the affair and what we have now is really something special. The issue would be a big lie on top of the affair and after discovery. It's a problem. I can see her withholding any physical details for the sake of the marriage. I don't see her withholding this for any other reason, not to win an argument, not for vanity, and not to simply save face. This is the reason she withheld the affair for years. She knew we weren't strong enough before, and she's right. Some of you will call BS on that, but my therapist, her therapist, and both of us agree on this point. Having said all of that, if it comes out that it was a PA, then I'm willing to at least try therapy and do what I can to say I've given it my all, but PA details coming out now would set us back to square one. It would be D-Day all over again, and that's a pain I never want to experience again on any level. Still, I think it might also depend on the level of physicality. If some things happened, or if they had slept together once and she shut it down, that's a bit different than if they had an ongoing dirty relationship and she was making plans to leave. It's a lot to process. A lot to process. There's no easy answer. I know I've said in previously that I'd likely be done or whatever, but if actually faced with that reality, well, the truth is I'm not sure how I'd handle it, but my gut feeling is that I'd give it an honest shot. I've made it clear to her recovering from betrayal is extremely difficult in the best of circumstances, but hearing details either third party or even from her 3 months after D-Day would be a potentially devastating situation, perhaps catastrophic. She understands this, no doubt. TF, my source. He told me he was upset ever since we first spoke, and refuses to believe anything was happening between them. Again, he doesn't know the full nature of the text. This is simply based on what he saw every day. He was scrubbed into approximately 85% of the cases that my W would have been on with OM and was present in the or suite practically 100% of days my W was there. He was present in hallways, break room, cafeteria, anywhere W was. He says he never once saw them together, never saw them getting coffee, lunch, or in break room together. He said he never saw him flirt with my W. He doesn't doubt that OM would try, given his past and present actions and given that my W is attractive. He just doubts that my W would have done anything to risk her marriage or career. He says she talked about me all of the time. Even to OM he says if anything happened it would have had to have happened away from hospital grounds. This is another confirmation that I need to ask the question about off-campus excursions when the poly happens. Anyway, it was an interesting call and was nice to get some unsolicited feedback. And no, W has not been in contact with TF. This is not some rehearsed alibi. I asked him point blank and I checked her phone to be sure. I left the house for a week following D-Day. The disclosure was on a Saturday. I spent pretty much all Sunday recovering texts and took the old phone and laptop with me when I left for work Monday morning and grabbed a hotel after work. I told her in the firmest way I knew how that I needed to leave the house so I could break down, scream, yell, cry, whatever without worrying over what the kids would think, and I needed to get away from her as I needed to decide if I even wanted to think about reconciling. I was also extremely fortunate to get an appointment with a top-flight therapist who specializes in IC for men who have been betrayed in relationships. For the record, I have shown plenty of anger with my W, and I believe it justified. Very justified. I've been calm with here, however, as I'm in a different state of mind right now. I'm in a good place mentally and physically, and I don't want my actions or words shrouded in hate. Of all of the things that are potential hang-ups of the why questions of is this in her DNA and will I be fighting this for the rest of my life if I stay, and also the burning question in my mind, and I think both of you touched on part of this, how long would this have gone on if he hadn't grown impatient? And this is something that really gives me pause, as it really can't be quantified if he had stayed the course, given the trajectory they were on. From acquaintances to colleagues to friends to texting buddies to flirting to some risque talk to downright filth. If he had stayed the course, how long before her will would have been broken down enough that him moving in for a kiss would have had her kissing back, or when he asked her to go somewhere with him or come to the doctor's sleep lounge or whatever? How long before it would have happened? These are the burning questions. I theorize that it would have happened with their running. As I mentioned, I've supported her hobby, and she has supported mine. Guitar player. My W is not a 5 Kelvin every other weekend type of runner. She does half and full marathons and would maybe do a couple of major races every year with a few 5K and 10 Kelvin runs sprinkled in. We'd often make the runs an extended weekend together. Anyway, they never ran a race that I didn't attend while the affair was happening. Still, I do travel occasionally for work, typically a max of 4 times per year, but usually less. I could see them planning an easy hookup if we're to have ever been out of town with a race nearby. I could see him giving her the hey, why don't you come by my hotel and get a shower before you head back sort of thing. It would be as easy as pie, and he was stalking her at runs. I see this so clearly now. I did some research and found that for 2 to 3 particular races, he only ran them when my W did. He had never run them prior to meeting her and hasn't run them since their breakup. These are things I'm working through. Just because I've said I want to reconcile, it doesn't mean I'm ready to say okay, the poly proves it. Let's just live happily ever after with rainbows and candy all around if she passes the poly. I'm taking my time. She's doing the things she needs to do, but I need to see her do it for an extended period of time and be confident that she's staying the course. As you all have said, I need to take care of me first. Yes, part will come. This weekend was a step in the right direction. I have no doubt that leaving for the week and then having her come visit me at the hotel so I could go over the terms of reconciliation that I had for her made a big difference. She knew at that point full well that walking away was not only an option for me, but it was something I seriously considered. We've talked a good bit about the sacredness of needs and so forth. It was, in my opinion, mostly about ego. It stroked her ego to have a hotshot surgeon telling her he wanted her. And yes, it allowed her to explore a side of herself that, for various reasons, she was not comfortable with before. The OM was not on staff at the hospital my W worked. He and his partner at the time, more on this in a bit, were brought on under contract as surgeons with privileges. Their home hospital was a bit smaller and they were looking to expand their practice. The OM was at my W's hospital about 3 days per week, max. He would get there, get cases done, and get out. He wasn't one to sit and have coffee or lunch. He typically worked through. And as much as it was a shock to see the dirty texts, it would actually be a bigger shock to know my W sat and had coffee or lunch with this guy. She wouldn't have wanted the hospital gossip lines to pick up on anything. Knowing the layout of the suite and pre-operation areas, my main concern with physical stuff comes down to this: there's not a lot of places to hide in this area, and too many people moving about. This explains the OM constantly trying to get my wife to leave the area. So, my concerns are 1. Did she ever leave to meet him somewhere, regardless of whether anything happened or not? Did she sit in his car with him or he and hers somewhere and talk intimately? Did they fool around in a car or elsewhere? And 2, I could see canceled cases being a potential problem. We all know that surgical procedures get canceled, rescheduled from time to time for a variety of reasons. In this instance, a canceled case could possibly give them both time to go to another area of the hospital, the dreaded doctor's sleep lounge, or an empty office, a supply room, or wherever. The texts don't indicate she ever agreed to meet him, and she of course denies ever being alone with him with enough time for anything, but they were alone long enough for him that he felt comfortable enough to try to kiss her. My mind has gone over these scenarios 1001 times. It's maddening at times. They spent anywhere from 6 to 10 hours together in our suites 2 to 3 times per week. She was the one who managed the schedule. Her desk was in an area with 3 cubicles just outside our area. His temporary office area was adjacent to those desks. She was in his office for 30 minutes or so in the morning. This was the case for the 4 years he was there, including the 2 leading up to the affair. Before you jump to conclusions about his office, it was a glass office with a glass door. I've seen it many times. Cameras and people all around. Still, with door closed, they could have talked about anything. The office he was in simply had 2 chairs and a large whiteboard with the daily schedule. They would go in and run through it in the morning. The first 2 years she wasn't the main coordinator, but she was for the duration of the affair. They would have spent maybe 30 minutes total time in there every week. This is a high-traffic area right across. Patients, families, docs, nurses, constantly moving through. But still conversations could have been semi-private. This is again why I want to make sure she didn't leave campus to meet him. Could have been arranged verbally. Just something else to think about. Last night was painful. Maybe the worst night since D-Day or the day I checked into the hotel. My therapist had encouraged me to list 5 or 6 things that were my ultimate pain points. Things that I know are going to take considerable time to get over, and the things that are occupying my mind daily. He encouraged me to face them now and not let them get buried or unresolved. He said these things need to be discussed with my W and discussed in detail and at length. She needs to know where I live, where and how I hurt, and she needs to know what the hardest things to forgive are going to be. She didn't say anything wrong last night. She hurts deeply as well, but that's not on me to fix. We've certainly talked about all of these things before, but last night I was finally able to articulate them the way that I needed to. In detail, we discussed them, really got down in the weeds and broke them all down. And it hurts. It just plain hurts. I feel guilty given some of the things that you all have walked through, but this still sucks big time. And the thing is, while I'm still angry at her actions, angry at him, angry at myself, it's just plain sorrow, deep sadness of this loss. As I explained last night to her, the innocence and purity of what we had, it's gone. We can start fresh and we can have a great marriage, I feel, but this will forever be a stain. And it's just so sad that it happened. She's hurting after last night, for certain. She's trying to reconcile who she was and how she could have let things get that far. As some stated earlier, she definitely compartmentalized her work life into one box and her family life into another. She has deep, deep regret. No doubts there. She's trying to heal but also trying to make sure I heal as well. She's handling it, but she's struggling a good bit as well. At this point, I say yes, I'm strong. I'm not who I was. She's not who she was. We just work together. And yes, I love her and I'm still very much in love as well. And I know there are some on here who still think she probably not only had a pop but turned every corner of the hospital into their own little porn studio. That certainly doesn't appear to have been the case, but I get it, I do. In spite of what's happened, I love her. With all my heart, really. If I am who I say I am, then my love will never fade regardless of the past sins. That doesn't mean I'm willing to just forgive and forget or whatever, or even put my heart on the line again. I'm not some uber Christian nice guy. I'm real and I'm broken, and I struggle with forgiveness in general. It does mean, though, that today, right now, even in the middle of tremendous hurt caused by her, I can see us getting past this and still being unbelievably happy. I can see it. This past weekend shows just how great we can be, even in the middle of strife. And the past 2 to 3 years have been great, with 2018 into 2019 just amazing. We can still have that, but there will be scars. There will be scars. I'm not naive enough to believe there won't be. She understands that nights like last night are not for me to punish her, but they are for my, and by extension our, healing. She asked again last night if she had taken any steps out of line and if she'd done anything to hinder my healing. To this point, she really hasn't. Yes, she is, and I see. That was a condition I placed on her from day one. Either go or I'm not coming home. No exceptions. We're back from the poly. For those that don't care about the details below, she passed all questions. I have to admit that I had a few butterflies when I told her where we were going, just out of concern for that car parking lot confession that seems to happen so often with these. It didn't happen. Just the opposite, really. I had her meet me at a coffee shop about 2 blocks from the building. We go here fairly often, so I didn't have to explain anything. Once I told her where we were truly going, she was obviously a little upset, but didn't break down. She simply said I knew it was coming at some point. I'm okay with it. I'm the one who brought us here. I've told you everything I possibly can, but I understand. I hope I can earn your trust." At this point I felt confident that she would pass and I'd heard the real story. I felt it all along, but still, 6 years and all. I'll post the questions along with the responses and results. I'll then try to dive into each one just a little to let you all know why I chose these particular questions. I know some of you would have asked other questions, but these are the questions that I needed to ask for my sake and my sake only. And yes, even though I asked one overarching question of physical touch, I did ask another specific one. The examiner suggested it says it can catch them off guard and often is a tripping point. Glad it wasn't. So here we go, all yes and no questions. 1. Other than his attempted kiss, did you ever have any physical contact with besides what was absolutely necessary to do your job? No. No deception. 2. Did you ever meet before, during, or after work hours away from the hospital campus? No. No deception. 3. Did the ever touch your genitals, over or under clothing? No. No deception. 4. Did you share pictures of yourself, clothed or unclothed, with No. No deception. 5. Have you contacted or attempted to contact since leaving the hospital? No. No deception. 6. Have you had other affairs or inappropriate relationships either before or after No. No deception. So, there you have it. I almost substituted a question for number 3, since we were already asking about physicality, but I felt this specific question should be asked. I almost had him ask her when tried to kiss you, did you kiss him back? But I already had the texts indicating pretty clearly that she didn't, and I just felt the other question deserved a specific answer. I wanted to make sure he hadn't gotten a quick feel or something that wasn't in the texts. So, breaking it down a bit. 1. Just making sure nothing else happened from a physical sense. I asked him to say the other than necessary for work bit, as they obviously stood shoulder to shoulder at times and passed instruments back and forth. Just didn't want a false negative out of it since they did come in contact for work at times. Examiner agreed it was a good idea. 2. This was a big one to me. Again, given my wife's standing and decorated career, I doubt she would risk it even in the fog of an affair. She would need to feel safe and secure. It would need to be somewhere else, and he knew it too. It's why he tried repeatedly to isolate her. This just backs up what the texts say, but still needed to be asked. Even if she passed the questions regarding physicality, if she failed this one, she would need to do some serious explaining as to why she was meeting him somewhere. It would establish intent. 3. Redundant, perhaps, needed to be asked. For me, you bet. Question itself is self-explanatory though. 4. My W was adamant that she would never be so careless. You did have an affair. Hello. She reiterated to me a few weeks ago that she never sent him a selfie or anything else either. She sends me a headshot a couple of times a week to say hello. She wanted to be sure I knew that she didn't send any. I wanted to be sure as well, especially if nudes of my were floating around out there somewhere. Notice the question was worded as share instead of send. Examiner's suggestion says she could have taken a picture and showed it to him, then deleted. Wouldn't have shown up in the texts. 5. Another important one. Making sure it did indeed end when she said it did. 6. I honestly didn't think this needed asking, but did anyway, just to be sure. Answer was as expected. So, there it is. Today took its toll on us both, to be certain. She wasn't angry afterward, just wanted to embrace. And so, did I. For what it's worth, the examiner told me behind closed doors that he's seen these cases over and over, and he told me to go home and rest easy, she's not lying. He said there's just no indication of it and that I should be relieved. How do I feel about it? Glad I did it, but sad that I felt I had to. Regardless of who she is today, she had an affair. Then she lied about it by hiding it for 6 years. I needed to make sure I wasn't being duped again, even though I knew in my heart that she was being honest. Folks, she's broken. Broken badly. It hurts her that she hurt me this way, and for that, I am thankful. Not thankful for her pain, but thankful that she's taken ownership and understands just how gut-wrenching this has been for me. If she wasn't hurting, I'd be questioning the sanity of trying to I know that some lurkers will still believe she's done more and that I just bought the lies again. That's okay, certainly you're right to think so. I, however, feel the same as I did before the poly, and that's that we went, and are still going, through a god-awful painful thing, but that it is pretty much as she has said it is. I have pretty solid evidence and a credible person who was there every day and saw nothing out of the ordinary. She passed her poly, no parking lot confession. I've tried my best to paint her into a corner with words and phrases, but she hasn't wavered. She's been supportive. And she hurts. I'm still going to have to work through some things, but we have something worth fighting for, and that's all I can ask for right now. Also, for those that think she planned this too well, we discussed the timing and her reading up on things at length last night and again today. It really was the conference she attended in September, and then we attended a couples retreat in October. Both of these served to light her on fire. She had always struggled with the lie, but now it was right in her face, and at a time when things were going so well with us. She said that something that was said in the conference and the overwhelming conviction prompted her to start reading up on how to reconcile, how to tell your spouse, how to help heal, etc. The line was, paraphrased, if you truly want marital bliss and you want to walk in God's forgiveness, then if you are holding something from your spouse, even something from years ago, whether it's financial unfaithfulness, adulterous relationships, or even bitterness, you owe it your spouse to give them the truth. It will be painful, but the results will eventually be a truly fulfilled and beautiful marriage, like nothing you've experienced before. She said she'll never forget the words and how painful it was to look at me when she got home. A little while after this, I came under similar conviction to write down my thoughts and unreconciled feelings and question, and just confront her in detail. There's more to her digging in and preparing, though it had been building for some time, a couple of years really. She has picked up 2 new friends in the running world, 2 awesome ladies that were and still are an extremely positive influence. Being with them was bringing her under conviction, as she said she felt unworthy of their company while still holding on to the lies. She just needed the jolt that she got. She was working on herself, and this was just sort of a final step. It was late fall when she really started reading books and things. Yes, it still pisses me off she waited these years, but I'm starting to understand it more. This is one of the pain points I just have to work with. If she hadn't taken the job to get away from him and shaken loose as she did, well, different story here altogether. And yes, I believe God's timing helped save us. We wouldn't have survived this in 2012 to 2014, and maybe not even 2015. We needed to reconnect, and I needed to kick the depression. And we did, on both counts. She said by the time the flirting started, she didn't really realize that lines were being crossed until the flirting ramped up in frequency and intensity. She says it was her arrogance that led her to believe she could handle it. She was too smart to get burned, and that she could stop this before it was a problem. By continuing, though, the ego boost shifted from work to personal, and she couldn't just turn it off. Though she did, in essence, when she got home every day. She said the 20-minute commute allowed her just enough time to sort of shift back into wife, mom mode. She would often run or work out after she got home, so that helped clear her head as well. She couldn't see it then but sees it so clearly now. And again, 0 boundaries. Yes, she absolutely compartmentalized her hospital life and family life into 2 separate boxes. And she says, again, her arrogance led her to believe she could handle it, and that he would eventually stop if she pushed back on going further. That actually did happen, but only after the texting turned to filth and the literally tried to turn it physical. As to how and when the lines were crossed, I found the text that changed the direction. My W laments this as much as anything, as she, correctly, surmises that there are 1001 ways she could have responded that would have ended it. She wishes she had simply taken this text straight to HR, then sent it to me. That would have been ideal, but I digress. The text was this: at the end of the day, my W would send him a text. He would be upstairs making rounds and visiting recovering patients. The text was always the same: hey doc, we're all finished down here and your on-call crew is on the clock. We're all about to leave, so let us know if you need anything else. His response was either okay thanks or thanks great job again today. Best crew ever. On this particular day though, he responds, well, I do need something. I need you. W responded with, what do you need me for? He replied with a winking emoji. We didn't respond, but that was it. She didn't establish a boundary here, didn't even say don't say things like that. She left the door cracked and he pushed it open and walked right through. From there it slowly progressed to her returning and reciprocating in similar fashion. And down the rabbit hole she went. We've established with each other that while she didn't go looking for an affair, she was very much a willing and able participant. This is a major pain point for me. She willingly texted him again and again over an extended period of time. It only ended because he tried to cross the only boundary she had established, or the only boundary she had left. Granted, she did the right thing by leaving the hospital and getting away from him, but yes, she was able and willing. Still, to deny that the circumstances played a role is to ignore a critical component as well. The circumstances certainly helped set the table, but my W did supply the food that kept feeding this. Let me also add that being at the top of the chain now is nice. She's in her office that she shares with her subordinate, female, older good person to be around, most of the time, and deals mostly with the CEO and nursing staff. The CEO is much older, and his wife works across the hall as the admin manager. W reports only to CEO. She only deals with credentialing and so forth with docs, not with them in or except for rare occasion. Mostly dealing with her staff and not directly with docs at all. Hours are set, nothing crazy. Much better environment all around. CEO sets the tone, great guy, very protective of staff. Still, the CEO will retire at some point. At the end of the day, I've had to ask to myself several very difficult questions. Working with a therapist has helped, but ultimately, I've made a choice. And it doesn't make me weak in any sense of the word. My W knows where I stand and that she's got some heavy lifting to do. Walking out the door one day after D-Day and telling her, don't call me, I'll call you. I'm not sure if I'll be back. Sia helped to set the tone. Forgiveness does not mean amnesia, and it doesn't mean you condone the actions. Forgiveness has opened my eyes to things, though. It's hard to explain. You'd simply have to live it to understand. You'd have to be us, in our shoes. Every situation is unique, even though certain tendencies do cross over in affairs. Each situation is different. I don't think I've mentioned this tidbit. I mentioned that my W wasn't on his on-call team. She was already on a team, working opposite weeks from the OM. They were never in the hospital together on weekends or after hours, and this is huge, as well. Opportunity and proximity and all. The surgeon that ran my W's team hated the OM. He was old, cranky, and didn't like the young hot shots. He wanted my wife's crew because they were more mature. My W was the youngest, and knew how to get in and get out and get home. Well, this OM lobbied to have my W put on his team. There's even a texting thing where we were basically begging her to try to join. It was pathetic, really. My W kept saying, I don't think that's a good idea. We need to keep some space, and so forth. She finally told him to stop asking, that she was with the other doc until he retired, and she hoped she would be off the call rotation altogether. He was pissed, and even stopped texting her for a while. Like a child. Sickening. I want to take all of my information to the right folks and let karma run its course. He needs exposing at a high level. He's left a trail of damage far and wide, and I'd hate to see this keep happening to good folks. This is the crux of it right here. Reconciliation is not for all situations, but in our cases, is very possible and certainly worth the effort. So many factors here, but one of the chief factors is the quality of the relationship before infidelity, and in my case, what it's been like since as well. We've had 6 years since they broke it off, and while it's still very fresh to me, our marriage recovered quite nicely from my depression and my W's time WOM. Each year got progressively better, with the last couple of years being downright amazing at times, and the early part of 2019 really showing our full potential as a couple. Of course, I didn't know then what I know now, but we're talking about the overall relationship, which, by the way, was also very good from our dating days and into even 2010. Other than that, we took each other for granted at times. Still, the period leading up to the affair and the period after are both really special. We have something worth fighting for, no doubt about it. I know we can recover if we give it the proper time, and my W continues to do the right things. If I didn't think it was possible, I'd be on here asking for advice on attorneys and separating assets instead. I just had an amazing and enlightening phone conversation with the OM's ex-wife. My TF suggested I reach out to her as she might be able to add additional insight, and she hates the OM now from what he knows. He's still Facebook friends with her. I was skeptical, as I was concerned about opening a new can of worms, but I'm glad I made the call. This guy is something else. Oh, and no new insights on W's affair with him. She knew nothing of it. I reached out to OM's ex-wife. Yes, this was dangerous as the conversation could have went several ways, but man am I glad I did. I contacted her through Messenger, telling her vaguely that I was trying to piece together some incidents involving her age, and told her my TF sent me. Her response was chilling. Did he ruin your marriage too? Yes, please call me at number at your leisure. So, call I did. I was not prepared to hear what I heard, I can tell you that much. Nothing incriminating on my W. She knew nothing of the affair. She said she just wasn't concerned with texting or phone use, as a person in his position gets texts, calls, constantly. My comment, given the nature of this OM, it is a testament to your WW that she was able to hold out. I say this because seeing these kinds of OM work, they get close very fast and they know what they are doing. Also, OM2 and OM3 in my case were doctors, and they seem to pick women who, like your WW, are married and seem to be decent and unlikely to have STD. They also like that decent women are the most likely to feel shame and least likely to confess. So now what are you going to do about the OM? My comment, part 3 ending coming out in a few hours. Let me rest a little bit and finish the ending. I will see all of you there.